morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we're going to approach a topic which has been more annoying to research than any video I can remember. And I've made a lot of videos. Now, a couple of months ago, the lovely old Noto Tafoya over on my Patreon, patreon.com/PTCGRadio, said, I was wondering if you could make a video going over the Pokemon rulings over time. Like in the base set how there were no restrictions. For example, you can play as many cards and attack going first, up to the rule changes to date. I would very much appreciate it. And I thought, that sounds like a fun video to make. And I'm finally actually making it. Now, this was a very awkward video to research. If you believe that there are any inaccuracies in this video, please let me know in the comment section. But please provide some kind of proof. A lot of the notes in this video, I have found conflicting reports floating around on the internet. I've done my very best. So it all started off back in the base set of the Pokemon trading card game, where there are no restrictions. We are looking at the rules going first, and back in the base set, when you went first, you could do whatever you gosh darn well liked. You could play as many cards as you liked without restrictions, you drew a card to begin your turn, and you could attack turn 1 going first. Now, it was important to note that if you won the coin flip back then, you had to go first. There was no choosing to go second. If you won the flip, you went first. And it is also fairly important to note that you flipped a coin before you set up. So when deciding your starting Pokemon, your bench Pokemon, etc., you knew whether you were going to be going first or going second. And back in the base set, this led to some ridiculous combos. Now, I've told you about the Erica's Jigglypuff deck. I've done a video about it, I'll link it in the description. But as a brief side note here, essentially what you would do is you would use a couple of Team Rocket cards to wreck your opponent's hand. What we had was Rocket's Trap and Rocket Sneak Attack. So what would happen is that Rocket Sneak Attack let you look at your opponent's hand, and if he or she had any trainer cards, and back then every card was a trainer card, there were no subsets, you chose one of them and shuffled it into your opponent's deck. And you got them down to a hand of 3 or fewer cards, and then you dropped Team Rocket's Trap. Flip a coin if heads, choose up to 3 cards at random from your opponent's hand, and your opponent shuffles them into their deck. Oh look, now they've got a 0 card hand. At which point, you start attacking with Erica's Jigglypuff, doing 40 damage as long as the opponent had no damage counters on, which they wouldn't because you were going first, attacking for just a double colourless energy, and frankly it all got a bit silly a bit quickly. There were some extremely aggressive decks back in the base set, and a lot of the reason was there were absolutely no restrictions on what you could do going first. Though we did see a little bit of a change in 2002 when we saw the release of the Expedition set. You see, Expedition made a fairly big change to the Pokemon TCG. Expedition brought in supporter cards, like actual proper supporter cards, with the rule that you could only play one supporter card during your turn. Now, we had seen a little bit of this previously. There was a Professor Elm card that came around in Neo Genesis. Very good card. Shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 7 cards. You cannot play any more trainer cards this turn. But we can't really count that. That was a one-off card. Whereas when Expedition came around, supporter cards became a thing, and with them a rule that you were only allowed to play one supporter during your turn. So, I mean, let's have a look at Professor Oak's research as an example. You can play only one supporter card each turn. When you play this card, put it next to your active Pokemon. When your turn ends, discard this card. Nowadays, you discard them straight away. Those rules aren't important for this video. So there was a little bit of a restriction after Expedition came out. But as we moved forward into the EX era, literally little X, which debuted in 2003 with the release of EX Ruby and Sapphire. As an interesting side note, this was the first set that was made by the Pokemon Company International after they took the game back from Wizards of the Coast, who had been making the game up to this point. And with the release of EX Ruby and Sapphire, we changed a couple of rules. Nowadays, if you went first, you were not allowed to draw a card, and you were not allowed to play a supporter. You could still attack, you could still play other types of trainer cards, but you did not draw a card to begin your turn, and you were not allowed to play a supporter. Now, it is interesting to note here that over on his excellent blog, Jason Klaczynski, and he won Worlds 3 times, he kind of knows what he's talking about, he referred to these rules as extremely balanced, and he called this format a very skill-intensive format. So apparently this was a good way to go. They made it slightly less advantageous to go first. In the base set, going first was everything, but not so disadvantageous that all of a sudden you were desperate to go second. But we did see another change coming in halfway, at least part of the way through. You see, just before Worlds 2005, an announcement was made to change the rules on stadium cards. Now, up until Worlds 2005, the rules on stadium cards had always been you can play as many stadium cards as you like during your turn, and there were no real restrictions. But right before Worlds 2005, 2 restrictions were brought in. Number 1, you were now only allowed to play a single stadium card during your turn. Restriction number 2, you could not play a stadium card to replace a stadium card of the same name. Now, the first expansion after this was in October 2005 when we got EX Delta Species, and the wording on supporter cards has changed in this set. They now read, if another card with the same name is in play, you can't play this card. Stadium cards before this had not had that wording on the card. So now that did bring another little restriction in going first on turn 1, because now instead of playing as many stadium cards as you like, you are now limited to only playing 1. Then we move into the Diamond and Pearl era, and the vast majority of these rule changes did come in at the beginning of a new block of cards. And when we got the Diamond and Pearl base set, we did see a few changes coming in. Now they changed the rule so that you set up before you flipped a coin. So now when you're setting up for the beginning of the game, you don't know whether you're going first or second. And that could make a huge difference. If you're going first, and you could attack going first, you may wish to have a nice attacker in the active. But if you're going second, you might not want a Pokemon up there. Although you are still forced into going first if you won the coin flip. But they changed the restrictions. The restrictions now were that the player going first on their first turn of the game was not allowed to play any trainer, supporter, or stadium cards. So all of a sudden now we brought back the drawing a card on your first turn. You could do that, you got to draw a card, but you now could not play any trainer, supporter, or stadium cards. Nowadays, they're all subsets of trainer cards. Back then, trainers were what we call items, and supporters and stadiums were different cards. So you would still draw a card, you would still be able to attack, but you couldn't actually do anything with your trainer cards. Now, there were a couple of interesting things about this. Firstly, we did have Sableye from Stormfront after a little while, that if it was in the active, you got to go first, but it also led to things like Sableye being really good. Because Sableye allowed you to use Impersonate, search your deck for a supporter card and play it, and it's an attack, not really a supporter, so you're fine. And things like that became really good turn 1 if you were going first. Of course, Sableye also had Overconfident, allowing it to donk, as in get a win before your opponent draws a card, going first. And then the Black and White expansion came along and kind of ruined everything. You see, Black and White went back to no restrictions. You still set up before flipping the coin, you still have to go first if you win the flip, but with the black and white era, they got rid of any restrictions. So turn 1 going first, you could draw a card, play any trainer cards you liked, and then attack. And we had issues with stuff like Sableye potentially donking back in the Diamond and Pearl era. I mean, one of the really popular decks in the Diamond and Pearl era was Gyarados. Gyarados evolved from a 30 HP Magikarp, so if you started Magikarp and your opponent started Sableye, you would lose that game before you ever got to draw a card. Okay. But it didn't happen all the time. The black and white rules broke the game. Now, I've done an entire video about this, I'll link it in the description, but suffice to say, broke the game. Because now you could have Sableye with the Pokebody Overeager that meant you could definitely go first, and then you could play as many trainer cards as you like. I did play a couple tournaments with Donphan with Sableye back in the black and white rules, and oh my goodness, it was ridiculous. With the help of Expert Belt, every time I went first, I was pretty reliably hitting 80 damage turn 1 into whatever my opponent started with. There was an entire 3-round tournament where I believe I took 5 turns in 3 rounds. That's how silly the rules got. Incidentally, I went 3-0 in that tournament, and nobody really had any fun because my games were 1 turn win, 1 turn win, 3 turn win. It wasn't exactly a thrilling tournament for either myself or my opponent. And Pokemon knew this. So there was a mid-season rotation. What happened was that right before US Nationals, we rotated to Heart Gold Soul Silver on. We kept the black and white rules, and we kept the black and white cards and the Heart Gold Soul Silver cards, but we got rid of all the Diamond and Pearl cards. There were other really awkward cards like Machamp, for instance, that you could evolve up first turn, going first, and then it got an instant KO on any basic Pokemon for a single energy. And if you go first, your opponent will have a basic Pokemon out. Machamp was a bit of a problem in this format as well. Keeping a turn 1 attack while giving turn 1 trainers caused some problems. Now, in the UK, we just ignored black and white. At our UK Nationals in that year, we didn't use black and white cards or black and white rules. Even though they were out, we just pretended that they weren't. In the US, there was a mid-season rotation. But after that, things were alright. No restrictions. Go on. And then we got round to X and Y. And in X and Y, we started bringing in some restrictions again. There was one restriction. The player who goes first on their first turn of the game can't attack. Simple as that. If you go first, you can't attack. You still draw a card. You still play as many trainer cards as you like. You can set yourself up beautifully, but you're no longer allowed to attack. And this is a good thing. You still get a big advantage going first, but all of a sudden you can no longer attack. So it made people really think twice. Because if you went second, you would get the first attack, but you wouldn't get the first evolution, for argument's sake. And there was another big change here, because we finally got a choice. In the X and Y block, if you won the coin flip, you were no longer forced to play first. You could choose to go first or go second. That was kind of cool. And there was yet one more change here. We went back to the days where you flip to see who goes first before you set up. So now when you're setting up, you know whether you're playing first or whether your opponent's going to have a turn and then you're going to play second. And this took a lot of the donking out of the game, not entirely, but it did pretty good work. Now moving into the Sun and Moon block, nothing changed. I mean, they changed the burn rules, but generally speaking, nothing really changed. You still flipped before you set up. You still had a choice when you won the flip. You still weren't allowed to attack turn 1. Simple as that. And then we got to the final change, which is just coming into effect very, very soon. It is, in fact, coming into effect for tournament play in 9 days' time, on the 21st of February. With the introduction of the Sword and Shield expansion, you can no longer play a supporter card on your first turn going first, going way back to the rules we had in the EX little X era. Nice. So now, when you go first, you draw a card, you can play as many item cards, etc. as you like, but no supporters and no attacking. And we might be going back to a stage now where for a lot of decks going second is better. Take something like Pikachu and Zekrom. With the combination of Thunder Mountain Prism Star and Tapu Koko Prism Star, they can use full Blitz in a single turn. So your opponent has a turn, they're not able to evolve or attack or any of that, and then when it comes to you, you can hit 150 damage straight away. That might be worth going second to have the first big attack. Or you could have something like a Welder deck, being able to attach 2 energy with Welder, then 1 from their hand, and get a free energy attack off right away. I'm a little worried about donks in this new format. It's not a donk in the strictest sense, but certainly I have a turn, I've left a Pokemon active, my opponent KOs and wins. That could work, but not in a fun way. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the Turn 1 rules throughout the years. In terms of research, this was one of the most difficult, awkward, and annoying videos I've ever had to make. But I think we got it down, ladies and gentlemen. I think we got it down. And there is a nice, neat summary on the screen here so that you can see the changes throughout the years. But now, I'd like to hear from you guys. Which of these formats is your favourite? If you had a choice, what would the Turn 1 rules be nowadays? Go nuts in the comment section. But do remember the rule. Be nice, would you? And then and also click that like button, because this video was a nightmare to make. So if you're still watching, please click like. And then make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we find out about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokemon in, but we love them nonetheless. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.